my name is Kat, and today I'm hauling just a whole bunch of books. So it's been a while since I did a book haul. It's been a while since I did a video. My last book haul was in January. So in the last few months, I have purchased quite a few books. I went on a bit of a book buying binge for my birthday. Don't alliterate. I have 20 books, I think, to haul, though I have already read most of them. So at least there's that. But yeah, let's get into it. Let's get started. I'm gonna kick things off with the handful of books that I myself did not buy, the books that I received from publishers. First up, I have here Eragon by Christopher Paolini. This was the BOOKSPLOSION Book of the Month pick for January, which was sponsored by Random House. And I was so excited to finally read this book because I never read it when I was younger. And I have heard from so many people who grew up with this book, who grew up with this series, and who loved it. And I was just very excited to get to this. It's a super fun, high fantasy adventure story about a teenage boy who finds this dragon egg, and he bonds with the dragon who hatches from it. But he wasn't supposed to find this egg. So, of course, trouble and adventure ensues from there. I do think I would have enjoyed this book more if I read it when I was younger, but I did still have a fun time with this, and I think it's a great introduction to the high fantasy genre for younger teens. If you want to watch the full spoilery discussion for this book, I will link the BOOKSPLOSION live show down below so you can check that out. Also from Random House, I have here The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm by Christopher Paolini. And this is a collection of 3 short stories set in the world of Eragon. It does take place a year after the final book in the inheritance cycle, so I haven't read this yet. I need to read the other 3 books in the series first. But if you're one of the many people who has read and loved the inheritance cycle, then you might be interested in this new collection of short stories. Next up, I have here Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen M. McManus. And this was the BOOKSPLOSION Book of the Month pick for February, which was also sponsored by Random House. And this is a standalone mystery thriller about this small town that is kind of known for a couple of unsolved mysteries. We have 2 main characters who each have very close connections to these previous unsolved mysteries. First, we have Ellery, who is just now moving to this town where her mom grew up and where her aunt went missing at age 17. And then we have Malcolm, whose older brother was the main suspect 5 years ago when the homecoming queen was murdered. And when someone starts making threats and another girl goes missing, Ellery and Malcolm both find themselves drawn into the latest mystery at Echo Ridge. I don't read a lot of mysteries and thrillers, but I really enjoyed this. I think it did the mystery thing very well because it kept me guessing and I did not predict the outcome, which is something I love in a mystery. So yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised by the surprise. And while I did receive this hardcover from the publisher, I actually bought the audiobook myself and listened to that. And I thought it was a really good audiobook. We have 2 narrators. I listened to it almost in one sitting on a plane. It was great. Very entertaining. But yeah, if you want to catch the full spoilery discussion, then I'll go ahead and link the BOOKSPLOSION live show down below. Next up, I have here Bloodleaf by Krystal Smith, which I received from the publisher HMH who I'm working with this month. They also sent me this enamel pin. I love enamel pins. I think they're some of the coolest book swag. This book just came out in March. It is the first in a new high fantasy series. Our main character is Princess Aurelia, who feels trapped in her life. She feels like she's a prisoner to her crown. She's banned from using magic. She's just not happy. But after a devastating assassination attempt, she escapes and she disguises herself as a commoner, where she's able to experience a different way of life and finally practice her magic. But even though she's happier in this new life, it's, of course, not that easy to escape her old life, especially when a new threat is exposed that only she can defeat. This sounds like just the kind of high fantasy book I'm gonna love. We have royal politics and doomed romance and blood magic and just all the things I'm into. I haven't been reading much high fantasy lately, and I miss it. Like, I feel ready to fall into a new world, and I think it's going to be this one. I'm really excited to read this. Next up, I have here Becoming by Michelle Obama, and this is a signed copy that I received when I met Michelle Obama, which was a thing that happened that I still kind of can't believe. This is another book that I have already read, though I actually bought and read the audiobook before I got this one. I don't read a lot of memoirs. I don't read a lot of nonfiction in general, but this was so good, especially the audiobook, because Michelle Obama narrates it herself, and it was just so interesting and also so inspirational and so motivating. I loved this. I loved listening to it. I loved meeting her. It was just, she's amazing. It was all amazing. Moving on to the Taylor Jenkins Reid section of this book haul. I have 3 books here that I bought myself and that I have already read. Let's start with the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So last year I bought the audiobook of this because people said it was amazing. And they were right, it was amazing. I was filming a reading vlog when I listened to the audiobook, so I'll link that video down below if you want to know more about this and more about my thoughts. I'm sure some of you are tired of hearing about this book because it seems like everyone on BookTube has been talking about it for over a year now. But yeah, I listened to the audiobook and I loved it. It was my favorite book of last year. So when I was on my book buying spree, I decided to pick up a physical copy because I was like, you know, the audiobook is fantastic. I will listen to it again, but it's one of my favorite books of all time. So like I can splurge on a physical copy. So I bought the hardcover. I also bought Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Because I loved Evelyn Hugo so much, I wanted to read more by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I picked up this one because it deals with themes of choice and destiny and soulmates, and I am just trash for all of those themes. And I ended up loving this. Like, not as much as Evelyn Hugo, that's still my fave, but this was fantastic. I read it in one sitting. We follow a 29-year-old woman named Hannah whose life is kind of a mess. She's constantly moving to different cities and changing meaningless jobs. And after a disastrous breakup, she decides to move back to LA where her best friend lives. To celebrate her being back, her best friend Gabby takes her out on town. And Hannah runs into Ethan, her high school boyfriend, her first love, the one that got away. At the end of the night, Hannah has a choice. She can either go home with Gabby or go home with Ethan. And that is where the book splits into 2 parallel timelines, and we get to see what happens if Hannah leaves with Gabby and what happens if Hannah leaves with Ethan. So like I said, I really enjoyed this book. Like, that premise sold me, and I feel like it was executed brilliantly. Like, it was exactly what I wanted from a premise like that. We see how this one decision can lead to 2 very different results. The book did get a little bit repetitive at times because we have these 2 timelines, and Hannah is growing as a person and discovering herself along both of these timelines. But I loved both timelines. I loved the ending, and I really especially loved the friendship between Hannah and Gabby. So yeah, really enjoyed this. Definitely recommend it if you also like books that explore these kinds of themes. Very much looking forward to reading more of Taylor Jenkins Reid's backlist. Because Taylor Jenkins Reid's backlist is all I have left, because I have, of course, also read Daisy Jones and the Six, which just came out earlier this month. Yeah? No, last month. Oh my gosh. I bought the audiobook to this because I heard it was amazing. It had a full cast. I listened to it the week it came out, and the audiobook was fantastic. Like, the performances were wonderful. However, unpopular opinion, I was a little underwhelmed and disappointed by this book. I did still enjoy it, and after watching some reviews from people who really loved this book, like, I kind of appreciated more hearing their perspective. But when I was listening to this, I found myself kind of bored with the story for the first third of the book. Like, the audiobook performances were great and entertaining, and that's what kept me listening. But I just didn't have, like, a strong emotional connection or emotional investment until, like, halfway through the book. I only really cared about half the characters. Like, there were a couple members in the band that I couldn't even remember their names really immediately after finishing it. And I think the format of this book is also a factor as to why I didn't love it as much as I have loved Evelyn, Hugo, and Maybe in Another Life. This book is told through interviews, so it's just people talking, like there's no narration in between. And I think listening to the audiobook is what saved this for me, because the performances were so good, they kept me invested. But if I had just been reading this, like the physical copy on my own, I probably would have DNF'd it in the first 100 pages. However, once I got emotionally invested, I was emotionally invested. I love the relationships here. I really love how Taylor Jenkins Reid approaches romance and relationships. And in all of her books, like, love isn't easy. There's always complications and nuance. But yeah, again, I did still enjoy this. Please don't come for me in the comments. It's just after loving her other books so much, I had really high expectations for this, and it didn't quite do it for me. The next book that I have here is Summer of Salt by Katrina Leno. I picked this up because I was seeing a lot of good things about it on the interwebs. It was a book of the month pick for Miss Sassy Cassie's book club, so I just saw a lot of people I follow raving about this book, and that convinced me to buy it immediately. Also, it has a female-female romance, so that grabbed my attention. This book is really hard to describe. Let me try to give it a go. Basically, it takes place over the course of a summer on this small island. Our main character is a girl named Georgina, who comes from this family where all of the women have magic. Her twin sister has had her magic since she was very little. But if Georgina's magic doesn't come to her before her 18th birthday, which is at the end of summer, then that means Georgina is never going to have magic. So yeah, we're following Georgina throughout her last summer on this island as she waits and hopes for her magic. Something mysterious and tragic happens, and Georgina finds herself trying to figure out what exactly happened and get to the bottom of this thing. I'm sorry for being vague. The book is only like 250 pages. I don't want to spoil it. But yeah, it's just a charming story that touches on a lot of different themes. Nothing in the story is really too prominent. Like, the magic is very light. This book is not about the magic. The romance is very light. This book is not about the romance. So it was very sweet and I did enjoy it. There's this mystery, but the book is not all about the mystery. I think maybe the family relationships and the coming of age might be the most, like, dominant element of this book. But yeah, it's just a lovely, magical story. I really enjoyed the writing. It's beautifully written. Definitely a good summer read. Definitely a book I will reread. And definitely an author that I want to read more by. Next up, I have here Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand. This is another book that is kind of difficult to describe. I picked this up because a couple of people, like, recommended it to me personally as, like, a Kat, I think you'll like this, you should read it kind of thing, even though I have heard some mixed opinions here on BookTube. Basically, we're following 3 girls on this island where girls have been going missing. There's Marion, who is new to the island. She just moved here. There's Zoe, the daughter of the sheriff, whose best friend was one of the girls who went missing. And then there's Val, the popular queen bee of the island, who might just be the one responsible for the girls going missing. So I've seen a lot of mixed reviews for this book. Like, some people really enjoy the first half but don't like the second half, and some people really enjoy the second half but don't like the first half. I enjoyed both halves. Like, on a story level, this was perfect for me. Like, I loved all the things that were happening. I loved the characters. There's a lot of queer rep. One of the main characters is Ace, and there's also a female-female romance, which was great. However, I didn't love this as much as I could have because something about the writing just didn't work for me. I'd have to reread this and really try to analyze why I didn't love the writing, but I just kind of felt a weird distance from the writing. I wanted to be really immersed in this world. I loved the story, I loved the characters, I loved the scenes that were happening. I just couldn't get fully immersed and invested in them because something about the writing kind of kept me at a distance. I don't know, it's hard to explain. I feel like this is just one of those books where it's very subjective, because even though I personally didn't love it because of the writing, I would still recommend it to people who are intrigued by the premise, because maybe the writing will work for you. And again, I loved the story, the characters, the ideas. So much about this book really worked for me, but the writing just didn't work for me, and it stopped me from loving it completely. I'm definitely interested in reading more by Claire Legrand, because even though my feelings are mixed about this book, her ideas and her stories, I'm still very intrigued to see what she can do in a different book. So, gonna read more by her. Next up, I have 4 books that I bought because I want to read the Prince Winner and Honors books of the year. I'm not going to talk too much about these books in this video because I talked about them in more detail in my winter TBR, so I'll link that video down below if you want more synopsis-y details. But I have here The Poet by Elizabeth Acevedo. This was the Prince Winner, and I think I'm actually going to buy the audiobook and listen to that because I've heard the audiobook is amazing. Then I have Claudia by Mary McCoy, which is a book that I had never heard about before. I have no idea what to expect for this because I don't know anyone who has read this book, but it won a Prince honor, so I'm really intrigued. Then I have A Heart in a Body in the World by Deb Coletti, and I actually don't think I bought this one myself. I think the publisher sent me an unsolicited copy, and typically when publishers send me unsolicited copies, those books go directly into my unhaul/donate pile, because if I didn't ask for it and I didn't buy it myself, I'm probably not interested in it. The interesting thing about this book is that I was kind of interested in it because I'd heard some really, really good things about it from people whose recommendations I trust. My hesitation in reading it is because I personally am just not a big fan of the more serious YA contemporaries. This is about a teenage girl who is dealing with the aftermath of a serious trauma, and that's not the kind of thing that I usually gravitate towards, but it won a Prince honor, and I set a goal for myself of reading the Prince books of the year, so I will get to this one. I just have to be in the right mood and mindset. And then I have Damsel by Alana K. Arnold, and this book I DNF'd. This book is a standalone high fantasy. It's kind of a feminist take on the damsel in distress rescued by a prince and whisked away to his kingdom to be his bride type of story. And that premise sounds awesome to me. I was really intrigued by this book. But I read the first 50 pages and something happened that made me go, did what I think just happened happen? So I looked up some spoilery reviews, and yeah, something happened that I don't want to read about. This book has a ton of content warnings, and I'm usually not a very sensitive reader, but after reading some of these content warnings, I just made the decision that I do not want this book in my brain, so I'm not going to read it. DNF'd. It did win a Prince honor, so I'm sure it's a good book for some people. There's definitely literary merit here, but it's not for me. It's not for me. Next up, I have here The Tea Dragon Society by Katy O'Neill. This is a gorgeous picture book, I guess. It's not really a graphic novel. It's also very light on the plot. Like, not a lot happens. But that did not take away from my enjoyment at all. The art is gorgeous, the world is wonderful, and even though it is kind of slice of life, like I just thoroughly enjoyed it. It's kind of a slower, quiet story, but it's beautiful. There's like a surprising amount of depth to the characters and the story for, you know, a story so short. It's about friendship and traditions and memories, and it's beautiful. There's a sequel coming out this fall that I am very excited to get. And I'm also very interested in reading more by Katy O'Neill because she has some other longer graphic novels and other stories. And I loved this. I want more. Then I have here The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. This is a book that I saw so much hype for before it came out. Like, I was really anticipating this, and then after it came out, I started to see a lot of mixed reactions. Some people did really love this, but I started to see more reviews from people who couldn't finish it and who just didn't like it. I haven't read it myself yet, but I do still want to. Honestly, the mixed reviews for this book kind of just leave me even more intrigued because I want to see where I'll fall, where my opinion will land on the spectrum of liking this book. And finally, I have here King of Scars and, oh shit, what's this called? The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. So King of Scars, I bought myself, and The Language of Thorns was actually a birthday gift from Whitney. Thank you, Whitney. Whitney also gave me this amazing recap of Ignite Me because I'd forgotten so much about that book. So double thank you to Whitney. So yeah, The Language of Thorns is like the short story fairy tale collection that is set in the world of the Grisha. And then King of Scars is, of course, the first book in Leigh Bardugo's new duology that is set in the world of the Grisha. I don't want to spoil anything for those of you who haven't read Leigh Bardugo's books yet, because I'm pretty sure you need to read both the Grisha trilogy and the Six of Crows duology before reading this book. I don't know, I haven't read these yet. I was really excited to read King of Scars right away, and then I saw some spoilers for it that put me off reading it for a while. I need to let some time pass so the spoilers aren't fresh in my head. I kind of want to reread the Shadow and Bone trilogy before reading this. So I don't know when I'm going to read this, but it will happen because the main characters of this book are some characters that I love. So I'm excited to revisit them and revisit this world. I just don't yet know when it's gonna happen. Okay, that is it. That is my giant book haul. I think that's gonna do it for this video today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a wonderful night, and I will have another video up soon. So I will see you then. Bye!